Hey everyone! Hey Rachel!
Hi, hi.
Oh, we are back and we're gonna stress ourselves out by talking about a stressful subject. But it's okay, you guys. You can stress out with us if you are also in the same indie author, even traditional published author boat. If you are just a reader, I hope you think this is amusing. I hope
You're
no,
entertained by our
that
pain.
sounds bad. I hope you still enjoy getting a sneak peek behind the crazy life of an author.
A sneak peek. We're really gonna give you some horror stories here.
Yeah, we're gonna get into it. Yeah, so I don't know. I kind of had the idea for this episode because I was trying to think of funny titles for the podcast or episodes, and it was 2 a.m. in the morning and I couldn't sleep and I was going and I thought of this one that's a play off of Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, and I was like, oh, it's reader, writer, salesman, cry. Because that is literally the evolution. You start as a writer and it's great. And then you start writing and it can be kind of awful because writing is not always as fun as reading. Then you start publishing and now you have to sell and then it actually is awful. And then you
Yes,
just
it
cry
is.
because now you have to do all this stuff and it's just
Mhm.
it's just awful.
It's a whole bag of worms. Like you think, oh, I'm gonna write a book, and then all this stuff happens, and you're like, oh wow, that's not what I thought I was getting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the worst part about it is it kind of ruins reading. If you let it,
Mhm.
we all take agency in our own lives and not
Yeah.
let, things ruin things for us. But after you start writing and especially after you're on Bookstagram for marketing purposes, reading gets so stressful. When I was a kid, it was
Mhm.
fun. It's great. But now it's you're reading ARC reads and you're doing beta reading, which is great. You should absolutely do that as an author.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you shouldn't do that because you should,
Yeah.
but the thing is, then it gets stressful because then you're on deadlines and then you have to you
Yeah.
have to give feedback and then you have to write a review and then it's like a book
Mhm.
assignment, like a reading report.
Yeah. Mhm.
And you can't just read a book. Then you have to post a pretty picture of it so you have
Mhm.
content for your
Mhm.
platform to sell your book. You can't just read a book in peace.
Yeah. It gets so stressful. And then I don't know about you, but I don't know if this is partly just like my anxiety riddled brain, but when I'm writing, I overanalyze every word in every sentence when I'm like polishing the Like I am brutal. And I spend a ridiculous amount of time on each paragraph. So then when I'm reading, I sometimes can't get myself out of that headspace. And then I'm criticizing every line I'm reading. And I'm like, well, this is stupid because now I can't enjoy a book because I'm in a too critical of a headspace because I just spent 3 hours criticizing myself while I was writing. So it's just, yeah, it changes everything. It really does.
It does. I wish I could go back to being 7. I just flop down on the couch
Mhm.
and I'm just reading.
Yes. Just so oblivious.
Yeah. Yeah. So when did you first know you wanted to be a writer?
Oh gosh. Well, I guess this will tell you a little about my personality. When I was little, I hated reading. I didn't have the patience for it. I was like, who wants to sit here and read words on a page for hours? That sounds horrible. So I was like, I don't want to sit here and read. I actually didn't start reading until I was about sixth grade. Um, and then I found, what was it? Tuck Everlasting. And I fell
Yeah.
in love. It was like the first like kind of fantasy romance I had ever read.
Yeah.
And I loved that book. And so then I would go to the library with my mom and I would spend hours and I would bring home a stack of like 20 books and I would read them in 2 weeks. And I would just read like fantasy after fantasy after fantasy. I read all kinds of stuff. So then I started really love reading. But even when I was little and I hated reading, I loved stories and I liked making up stories. And so I had like a nightstand full of single pages of like a story idea I had come up with, but then I would
Yeah.
get bored. And so I wouldn't continue. And I'd be like, that was cool. I'm going to shove it in a drawer now and then walk away. And then when I was in sixth grade, one of my friends she told me that she was writing a book, and I was like, wait, you can do that?
Yeah.
I was like, you can write one yourself? And she was like, yeah, I'm writing a book. Like, I've been writing it for a few years. It's in my journal. And I was like, oh, okay. So I went back to my house and I went through this stack of like single pages I had in my nightstand, and I just searched until I found one that I thought sounded interesting. And I was like, okay, I'm going to write an actual book now. And so I sat down at the computer. Back then we only had a desktop computer, and I just started typing on Word. I had no idea what I was doing. I was really bad at it. And the thing for me was that everybody, because I had such a short attention span and would get so bored, everybody was like, okay, this is like a fad for Rachel for like a week, and then she's going to get bored. And so almost as a little bit of I'm going to prove you wrong attitude, I kept up with it. And I actually wrote like 100 pages on Word document in middle school. It was terrible. It was horrible. I haven't read it in a really long time. But then that friend and I, we continued to write stories through high school and would, work on different ideas and stuff and all the time and through college. And so, yeah, so I started writing in about 6th grade.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I obviously always loved reading. I don't remember obviously I remember before I could read, but I learned to read when I was 5 and I was just always reading. And we had a book that was like write your own book. And so I was maybe like 6 or 7 years old, and it was like a picture book. So it said like write your own adventure story, and it had like a jungle story, like a story with like a mad scientist, a story with this, and it had like a full page illustration. And it was like, it almost was kind of like Storycraft, because it would start and it would like give you ideas for like different like problems that could occur. And then like the main quest. So it was kind of like a plotting helper, for kids. And so I read this book and I was like, oh, I'm gonna write a book. So I like got out the construction paper and like I started writing and illustrating like the jungle one. And like I stapled it together. And then my mom, like when my dad came home from work, she was like, oh, look, like it's her first novel. And then like I heard my mom say that. And it was just like, it was my first novel, and she was so like proud of me. And I was like, yeah, like this is what I'm gonna do. And so I just always like did that with the construction paper. And like my sister, well, we were homeschooled, so like we had a lot more time on our hands. Like, I'm just gonna say it. So like my parents at one point like bought us like one of those like long staplers so that you could like staple the middle of a book. So we would like actually like have like a construction paper cover, and then the white paper we'd like staple in the middle, and then we'd write it and illustrate it. And then we got stencils, and then so we started like typesetting our books, and so we like had stencils, and so we were just like always making books. And I was just always like writing on construction paper and in notebooks. And I had like a million stories that I started and never finished. And like now when I go back, I can like tell what I was reading at that point. And it was like very like, I never wrote fan fiction, but like everything was very inspired by what I was reading.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like some of it's like just straight up rip-offs of whatever you watched or read at the time.
Yeah.
Like I wasn't even trying to be creative.
Rip-offs. And then, as I got older, like when I was like 13, 14, like I could use the computer. And so things got a little more serious, a little more into it. But I never really finished a book until, like later in life. But like I was always writing, like, I didn't really write in college because I was a music major and I was just like so burned out and busy. I didn't write in college at all. But then I eventually came back to it afterwards.
Yeah.
But yeah, just like you, I was just like, I just never stopped writing stories. Like it's just what I did. And as a kid, it was never really my goal. Like I was like, oh, I'm gonna be a mom. Like that was my goal. But like writing for me wasn't a goal because it wasn't something that I had to like achieve. I just did it. So it was never a question in my mind. Of course, I was going to be a published author one day because I always wrote. Whereas, like, to me, like, being a mom is like, okay, well, I need to have the goal of, like, finding a husband. I need to do these certain things to, like, achieve it. Which I feel like is backwards. I feel like most people is like, oh, marriage is something that, like, happens on the side. And, like, your goal is your career. But for me, it was, like, always the other way around. I was like, I need to achieve getting married. And, like, writing, this just, like, happens because it's part of who I am.
Yeah, which makes sense because I feel like when you're naturally a storyteller, it's not really something you do. It's just part of you.
Yeah.
Like, it's not something you learn how to do or, are told you should do. It's the way you are. Like, even if you don't write them down, like, I remember coming up with stories in the backseat of the car on the way to whatever place.
Yeah, me
Like, your
too.
brain is just like, coming up and spinning all the time. Like, that's just part of the person. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I can't sleep at night.
Yes.
Like, my brain is just so active. Like, I start thinking about anything. That's why I have to read before bed. But, like, I'll put the book away and I'll be like, I'm tired now. And then I start thinking about one thing and I'm up for, like, another couple hours. Like, just thinking about it.
I think overactive minds is probably the curse of a writer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I feel like I have really good dreams because I'm a writer, because I'm so visual. Like, I'm always imagining stuff in my head. So, like, I've always had, like, lucid dreams, really visual, like, really great dreams. It's like going to bed and watching a movie. So, with that, like...
Well, I'm jealous because I have very vivid dreams, but I usually have nightmares fairly frequently, which is, like, the downside of being a writer, because my brain is like, oh, we're super creative, but here's a whole bunch of creepy stuff. Congratulations.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I just had the creepiest dream recently, and I woke up and I thought it was still happening, and I was, like, terrified. Like, well, yeah.
The worst part about a nightmare is you wake up and it's like, subconsciously you know it's not realistic and you know it's not happening, but because it's, like, dark and you're kind of hazy, everything feels realistic. So it's like you're kind of like sometimes I'll have a dream about, like, a giant spider or something, and I'll wake up convinced there's a spider in my bed. I know it's not real, but I'm sitting there searching for the spider for 15 minutes.
Yeah. Well, because, like, the emotions stay with you, and emotions are hard to get rid of. Like, even if you tell yourself, oh, that was an emotion from, like, a situation that didn't really happen.
Yeah.
Like, you can't just tell your body to stop feeling something. You can't be like, oh, that's not real, and it just stops.
Yeah. I mean, on the flip side, it gives you kind of a little bit of insight to, like, what it would genuinely feel like to be in certain scenarios when you're writing, which is kind of cool. Because I had a dream. This is the weirdest dream ever. I had a dream once that I was in a mall and I was at a Macy's and nobody was in the mall except for, like, me and 5 people. And, like, it was quiet. There was no one there except for a bunch of Uruk-hai from Lord of the Rings. And they were, like, legit hunting us down, trying to kill us. And we were, like, running through clothing racks and then, like, running through, like, the offices behind the store and stuff. And it sounds hilarious, but in the dream, I was so genuinely terrified. And then when I woke up, like, that terrified feeling, I'm like, oh, I'm going to use this in a story. Because this feels legit.
Yeah, it's great inspiration. See, like, even when we're sleeping, our brains are, like, telling stories. And, like, I feel like that's just, like, how it is. And it's annoying sometimes, but it's also, like, it's a gift.
Yeah. That's when you know you're meant to be a storyteller.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. So that's how we need to be a writer. But so when is the time? I feel like there's another point for me when I decided I was going to be serious and I was going to publish. And that's when I started reading the craft books. That's when I got, like, social media. That's when I did. And that was, like, a whole nother step, I feel like.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when was that for you?
Well, I mean, I always knew I wanted to write, but I never really thought that I would publish, because I figured I wasn't, especially because self-publishing has only been a thing for not that long. And so back in the day, it was not this attainable thing. It was like, oh, you have to get an agent and you have to, be chosen to be published. And I thought, well, I'm never going to be chosen, so it'll just be a hobby. And then I went to school to be a teacher. And actually, when I was a senior in high school, you had to do a senior project where you pick a career to do a whole project about, this is where I should have known immediately. I could have done it on teaching, but I did it on writing. So I should have known then that's what I should have been doing. But anyway, I ended up going to college to be a teacher, pursued that, substitute taught, eventually got hired as a teacher. I love children, but I did not love the experience at all. And the entire time, which I talked about this the last episode briefly, I spent so much time while I was in school writing. Like, my kids would be at recess and I was writing. Like, I would stay up until 10 o'clock at night writing all the time. And so then when my teaching job fell through, I was very lost for, like, that entire summer. I was like, I don't know what to do. I don't want to go teach again. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with my life. And I kept coming back to the same thing, that the only passion I've ever had where it never wavered for me has been writing. And I was like, I don't know if I can do this. And that's where I pulled the Camille Peter's book off the shelf, and I was like, I think she independently published. And I looked and she had, and I was like, well, if she can do it, I think I can do it. And I just decided I'm gonna do it, because for me it was kind of like I have nothing else. Everything else fell through. It's like, what else am I gonna do? All right, I'm gonna take a shot. So then I was like, all right, I'm gonna start self-publishing. And I spent that last winter writing my first book and learning how to self-publish. And then for me, if I'm not passionate about something, I'm not incredibly motivated.
Yeah.
So like as at a job, like I'll do what you ask of me, but I'm not going to go above and beyond if I don't really care. It's not a great quality, but whatever. But when I'm super passionate, I'm like a dog with a bone, and I will do whatever I have to do in order to like be successful at it or whatever. So once I decided to start self-publishing, I mean, the problem for me was not getting motivated to do the job or to figure any of it out. It was teaching myself how to take breaks was a bigger problem. So yeah, once I decided I was going to self-publish, I was like, all right, we're doing this. I'm taking this seriously. So I wrote every single day. I'd get up first thing in the morning and I would write from morning until night. The difference for me was before, when I was just writing for fun, I didn't know any of the craft of storytelling. I just knew that I had an idea and I would write it. And so then once I started writing that first book, it wasn't until actually I'd like finished the first draft and I realized that the story just wasn't really feeling right. So I did a bunch of research on the internet, and I found the website Helping Writers Become Authors.
Yeah, I love that website.
Yeah. And like I found all of their stuff about plot structure and like, you know, the different plot points in the story and how they should be and stuff. And that for me was like, okay, now I understand what it means to tell a story. And so it's because that's a big difference for me. Like, you know, wintertime last year, I didn't know any of those things. And now I'm like, oh, yeah, you have to hit certain beats. There are certain ways to do stuff. And it's just like a whole new world. But I loved it because that's what I love to do. So it felt natural to learn all of it. So, yeah, that's how kind of it switched for me. What about you?
Yeah, mine is so similar. So my thing for me was like, I feel like, I mean, some people would say like, you know, because I grew up homeschooled and like I was doing my own thing. And I know a lot of people, and especially myself at one time, would say like I kind of grew up in like fantasy world. But for me, going to college and like being in like in the real world and like doing things that like you're supposed to do, but blah blah blah, like that to me is like the fake world. And I feel like I had to come back to like the real world, like how I grew up and everything, because I always loved writing. But I liked music too and like acting. So I wanted to be like a musician and a singer and like an actor and all this stuff. And I decided I wasn't going to major in English because I wanted to have something to write about. Like I didn't want to have that be like my full-time job. I wanted to have a job and then like write on the side. And which looking back now might have been a great choice, because maybe had I majored in English, it would have made me hate writing. But there's also, I don't think music was like my main passion. So it could have been like, that's really what made me hate it. But so I went to school for music and it was extremely stressful. I mean, like all this stuff, like you watch in shows about like music being super competitive and toxic, and like the teachers are just like, I think they think they're like being tough on you to be like kind, because it like prepares you for the real world. But like, yeah, it was like really bad. I ended up hating music. I stopped writing, and I feel like I just lost like the natural like motivation I had, like especially as like a homeschooled kid. Like I had the entire day to myself, and like I was like you, like, you know, with the dog with the bone, like I would just like, okay, cool, I did it. But then going to school for me, and it was like I was being told to do all these things. Like I'd never really been told to do anything before, you know. So then I was like, I didn't know how to like self-motivate anymore, because I like had to readjust.
Yeah.
And I started working after college, and I was working, you know, as a professional musician. I was also working in a nursing home, and it took me about maybe like a year or so working, a year or two out of college, where I came back to writing. And I was like, this is what I want to do. And I was actually serious about it. And I joined Instagram, like I made a writing account. And I had originally only wanted to be traditionally published, but I knew like as you were querying, you like it was a good idea to have a social media, you know.
Yeah.
so that agents could like look you up and like see, because these days like traditionally published authors are expected to like have a big platform and like help out with
Yes.
marketing like that.
Yeah.
So I created one and I learned about indie publishing, which I didn't really like. In my head it was like, oh, like these people who write really bad books with like these awful covers, like that's the only thing indie publishing.
Mm-hmm.
And I discovered, which there are a lot of people who just like don't put in the effort who publish,
Mm-hmm.
but like there are a lot of people who like do a really good job.
Mm-hmm.
And I started like meeting some of these indie authors. I read their books. I was like, wow, this is like actually really good. Like I wouldn't be able to tell, like it's not traditionally published.
Yeah.
And so not only I learned about indie publishing, I also learned about storycraft, because I was always just like, a natural pantser, and like I thought I was great at writing, but like I needed some improvement, but I didn't know until I came to like writing Instagram and I joined a local writers group. I learned like there's like all these things I needed to learn about writing, and I read Save the Cat, and I worked with critique partners, and I learned how to critique myself for other people, because at first I was like, I couldn't tell what was wrong with anybody's writing, let alone give them advice how to fix it. Like I was so like I couldn't even do that. But like the more I worked with critique partners and beta reads and writing groups, and I read all these craft books, and I was getting all these advice from people on Instagram, I put in the effort into learning my craft, which was something I had never done. Like when I was in college, I studied composition. I had like a secondary concentration in composition. My professor was like, well, you need to have like a beginning and a middle and end. It's just like writing. You don't just like start writing willy-nilly. And I was like, but I do. You know what I mean? Like I had like no sense of, like I had no sense of structure, or the fact that there was like all these different like craft techniques. As a composer, he was like, oh yeah, you know this from writing, but I didn't, because I had never studied structure like that. But yeah, like after college, after working a little bit, I went back into it and I learned all these things, and I learned about indie publishing. I learned a lot about like marketing, and that's when I learned more about like kind of like design stuff and like editing photos and different colors and fonts, because then you're creating content for like Instagram. And because I was doing that, I was like, you know what, like maybe I would like formatting and like, hiring a cover designer or like all this stuff, because I really like the design aspect too. And I just realized like I liked doing the tasks that an indie author has to do more so than a traditionally published author. And I would rather do that because I actually enjoy doing it. Like if you just like writing, you don't enjoy all the other stuff that comes with it. Like maybe you don't want to do that, but you can always hire out too. It's not like a deal breaker, either way. But like I loved it so much, and I was like, I want to be indie published. Like maybe down the line I'll query, but like right now, like that's like my only goal. And like that's when I started taking it seriously, and I was like, okay, I'm going to publish. And that opens up a whole new can of worms. Like,
oh my gosh, yes. It's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a good thing nobody like that you don't like even though we can tell you everything, it's a good thing you don't really know everything you personally are going to have to experience ahead of time. Because if you knew, I don't know if it would be so easy to do it, because then it would be like, oh wow, I don't want to deal with all that. But once you like actually are in it, it's you just do it.
Yeah. And you get used to it slowly. Like you learn all the time, like whip and TBR and MC, and like
They should sell like a dictionary for that stuff though.
Really should. Yeah, if anyone's curious, whip is work in progress. So like whatever book you're working on. MC stands for main character, and TBR is to be read. So, and then after you join like Bookstagram, your TBR just like, because now it's not just like your friends recommending you books that in real life. It's like the whole online community of thousands of people are like, oh, this is good. Or it'll be like other authors, oh, like buy my book. And you're like, oh, that sounds good. Let me put it on my TBR.
Yeah. You will never run out of things to read ever again.
no, you will not. Like, yeah. So, what did your life look like after you made that step? And like, what things have come up in like your writing career, like especially the stressful things, and like, how did you balance it and figure out like maybe you let some things go, maybe you said no to certain things, you know, like what did that look like after you made that decision?
Gosh. I mean, I joined Bookstagram in October before I had published because I thought first I did it because I wanted to see if any other authors were like posting behind the scenes stuff for how they wrote or like how they planned was what I was looking for. And then I found really that people are on here for the most part to advertise. And I was like, oh, we have to self-advertise. That makes sense. And so I kind of like had like a really quick crash course on how to do that because I hadn't been on Bookstagram very long, and then all of a sudden I was self-publishing. And so I kind of just mimicked what other people are doing. It took me so long to be willing to try reels because I was just like, I don't know. It seemed like a really scary thing to do. I was like, I've never made a reel. Like people are gonna judge me. I'm gonna be really stupid, and like it's just gonna be ridiculous. Nobody's gonna like it. So it took me a long time to get the hang of it. And I feel like the hard part about the self-marketing on Instagram is there's so much you're watching other people do it, and there's so much of trying to figure out what they're doing and whether or not what they're doing works for you and like, you know, what types of posts you like to make. I think that's been the hardest part for me is finding the balance between the necessity of posting, because I went for a month during the fall months where I didn't post at all because I wanted to see if it like made an impact on sales, and I was like, okay, it actually does. So it actually makes a difference. And I was like, okay, that's great to know that being a marketer on Instagram is a big deal, but how do I balance that with time writing? Because to me, and I guess I don't want to like sound negative, but there are different types of self-published authors, and there are people who like write a story and then they're like, okay, I'm gonna get like the best cover art and I'm gonna market really hard and all this stuff. And then you get the book and you're like, but it's not that really well written because you didn't put the time and energy into that part. Because to me, like I can have the best marketing in the world, but the point is that I need to have the best product in the world. So for me, I'm like, my time and energy is majorly spent on the books because I'm like, I want the story to be perfect. I want the pacing to be perfect. I want the characters to be perfect because to me, that's the meat and potatoes of what I do. And so it's like, that's where I want all of my time to go. So for me, the hardest part has been finding the balance of time between spending the appropriate time writing and then also spending time marketing, and then also, and I know everybody feels this struggle, finding ways to market that are actually enjoyable has been so difficult. It's like you do one thing for a while and you get so burnt out on it and you're like, I don't want to do this anymore. And so it's just it's been a struggle to figure out both of those things, and I don't know that I really have it down. Writing for me has been the easiest part. I'm like, okay, I get up at 7, I write all day. Like I don't literally write 8 hours a day, guys, just so you know. Like I take breaks throughout the day. So it's not like I sit there at the keyboard all day long. I'm doing other things too. But that's my primarily what I'm doing. And that part's easy. Like, you know, I'm keeping track of how many words I write and all that stuff. But trying to fit in marketing, because some people, you know, they'll batch create content. And I've tried that a couple of times and I've always hated it because I feel like I'm wasting a day. And then B, I'm like, how do you keep track of what you posted and what you haven't posted, or what audio you've used and what you haven't used? And I'm like, well, but then I create like a blurb for that post that worked last week when I wrote it, but now I don't feel that way anymore when I'm posting it a week later. So like all that kind of planning stuff, I just haven't loved. So, I mean, the only thing I know now is you kind of like, I guess with your TBR, don't force yourself to read things you don't want to read. Don't force yourself to post things you don't want to post. Because I think it shows. And I think when you don't enjoy it, people don't enjoy seeing it. And it just bleeds you dry so fast. Mm-hmm. So it's just, I mean, it's not really an answer or a help you fix your problems, I guess. But trying to figure out what you do enjoy and what you don't enjoy. And don't force yourself to do the things that you hate doing, because it's not good. Because I actually read about New Year's resolutions that if you pick something, like if you decide I'm going to start working out and you say I'm going to start running 5 miles, but you hate to run, you're never going to keep up with it because you hate to run. Like, pick something you enjoy and then you'll keep up with it. So it's just, I don't know that I've really got that figured out yet, but it's still a struggle for me. So I don't have any answers, but that's where I'm at now.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, lately, my new strategy, I always change up my strategy on Instagram, which I think is fine. Actually, it's probably for the best, like being flexible with your life. My strategy right now is I'm going to spend a few days creating something I really enjoy, like something that I actually enjoy making, and then I'll post it instead of like posting every single day, and I'll just think of something. I'll be like, yeah, this is what I do. I want to do more like quality over quantity. And there is something to be said for posting every day. You increase your chances of things getting out there. But I think you have to do what works best for you. And at the end of the day, like, okay, I'm still using Instagram. Like, I'm still on there. I'm committed. Me maybe not doing the most perfect way of creating high quality things every single day. Like, that's okay. Like, you have to give a little. But as long as you're still doing something, like, it's better than just like giving it up totally and not having that platform at all. So like the last reel I made, and actually I resisted reels for the longest time. I was like, I'm not doing this. And now I don't know what's wrong with my Instagram. Like, maybe I need to update the app. I think I tried updating it. It didn't. I have a glitch where, like, if I try and create a post, it like crashes the app. So now I can only make videos.
Oh my gosh. God's like, well, you hated this, so we're gonna have you do a lot of it.
Yeah, because like, and I didn't even notice for the longest time because like I went like a month only making reels and I didn't even notice it. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna do a post today. Like, I'm gonna be different. And like I tried a million times, and every time I like clicked, it would like crash the app.
Oh my gosh. That's so weird.
Okay. Like,
I mean, at least if you download the app on your computer, you can post a post on your computer. You cannot post a reel, but you can post a post.
I should do that. And because right now I was like, you know what, that doesn't matter because I've been making reels anyway. Yeah. So, but if I do come up with where I'm like, okay, I really want to do a post, I'm sure I'll figure out like a way to do it.
Yeah. That's kind of fun.
But yeah, so the last reel I made was like a choose your own, like generate like a fairy tale retelling. And I spent like 3 days making it. I worked on it a little at a time, and I enjoyed making it. Like, and then like I was kind of upset like that the slides were going by so fast because like I like edited all the photos and I had the design just perfect and I picked the perfect photos. And I was like, man, like I just want to like hang this up on my wall and look at it. Like, I enjoyed that.
Yeah.
And a lot of people enjoyed it too. And I think like going forward, like that's what I want to do. I only want to create content that like I absolutely like just love. Like I feel like you need to love your content, and you should, create with other people in mind. Like, what are people gonna like? But the thing is, you're gonna attract people who like the same things as you. So it like kind of ends up being the same thing, like write what you love. Like there's gonna be readers who love what you like, so like you please yourself and you please your audience, and like that's your true audience.
Yeah, it's just like writing. Like everybody has a niche that only you really fit into, but there's a whole host of people out there who love whatever that is. Like whether it's, what you're writing and they love to read it, or whether it's the content you're making on Instagram and they love to watch it. Like you kind of just have to, and I guess that's the hard part too, is there's really no shortcut to it. You kind of just have to play around for a while and figure out what you really enjoy and what you're really good at, and then just keep doing more of that. Because there are people who love that. Yeah.
Yeah, you really do. And I would challenge anyone who's listening. I mean, just go to my Instagram and like scroll back. I do this a lot on other people's. Scroll all the way back to the beginning, and you can see like all the different things I've tried. Like when I started out, I didn't know how to like edit photos. Like everything looked awful, and just I love doing that. I love going to like huge accounts, and I love the people who don't delete their old stuff, because some people do. But like I love seeing where they started from, and that's always really inspiring to see, because they started with like these grainy photos and like 14 people liked it, and you can see like their skills improved and like they got better at what they did, and you know, it's just inspiring. And you can also like learn too, like, oh, well,
Yeah.
they post pictures that look like this, or like looks like this, maybe I should try that. Or they arrange their feed, or everything is the same color, or whatever it is that they do. Or like what kind of captions are they writing? Like, are they asking questions? Because that for me is a big one, is like, I will not post anything that does not have a question to like engage people with.
Yeah.
Like, I will not do it, because like, you know, because a lot of people will just like it and scroll, or maybe they won't have an answer for you. So, you know, and like, you don't have to answer the question, but if you ask somebody a question, and especially if it's a topic they're excited about, then they'll go into your comments.
That's
and
true.
like, then you get to know them. And so I would find like, if I post something without a question, like, it just does not perform as well.
Yeah.
Because it's about engagement, you know.
Yeah.
You know.
See, I feel like I'm better at the blurb for the picture than I am about the pictures. I feel like I still have not figured out how to get good pictures. And I think part of it is most people who take good pictures, like your feed is so aesthetically appealing. Like everything you post is so cute. And I'm like, what? And I think it's that I haven't taken the time, or I guess sacrificed the space to create like just like one area where it's like really good lighting, and I can like set up something cute that's just like ready to go. I can put a book on it and film something really fast. Like I think I need to create like an area in my room or my office to do that with, because that's the hard part for me, is like I'll have something I want to say, which I never thought about asking a question. That's a smart idea. For me, I usually feel like, and I don't do it on purpose, I guess I feel a need to like word vomit a lot.
Yeah.
My posts tend to be like me sharing something like vulnerable, or I'm struggling with this, or this is where I'm at, or whatever. I tend to do that a lot. But my pictures and my videos are never that pretty. And I think that I probably need to spend some time figuring out an area that works for me and that I like the look of and the aesthetic and stuff. I think that's probably
like, I feel like a staging area is really nice, because in the past, like, I set up and I batched like all my photos, and I had it set up on a table with like my flowers around it, whatever. But the problem with batching is, then, you know, 3 months down the line, like, there's nothing you want to use anymore. So that's why, like, I set up my bookshelf. My bookshelf, guys, it is in the middle of my bedroom. Like, you walk in the bedroom, you see the back of my bookcase, but I put it here so it'd be by the window, and it would just be easy, because you need, you know, the good lighting. And like, you know, that's what it is. Instagram is not reality. Like,
nope, it's not.
But another thing that I loved doing, and if I was like in a more rural area, if you go back on my Instagram, you'll see I had a phase where I did outdoor photos, and so all the pictures of me and books were outdoors. And I want to get back to that eventually, because it always matched, because it was always outdoors, like green with the trees, and it always looked pretty, and it was just so nice. But now, like, where I'm living now, I have to drive like 30 minutes to get to a place, and then I have to like batch it all, you know. But that's another thing, like, if your house doesn't look that pretty, like, because not everybody has like a perfect, like, you know, IKEA model looking house.
Can you guys see the mess? Like, this is reality.
Yeah, you know, like, you might not have a lot of good lighting, or like your house doesn't look like anything you want to take pictures of. Go to a park and like just like take like nature shots with your books, and like nature shots of you with your books. And you know, that's always like an option too that I love. Like, eventually I want to get back into that, but for now it's just easier for me to like, I'll take pictures in front of my closet because it's white by the window and it like has a white background, or I'll do like the bookshelf, you know. And then like, if you have a couple props, like I have my little like I just knocked it down. Anyway, I have like all these like fake flowers, and so like I'll like arrange them around books, or I'll put them behind me, and then like it gives your feed some cohesion, kind of a thing. You know, and they're like, I got these online. Like, they were not like that expensive. You know, you can.
But they look so aesthetically like appealing in your pictures and videos. Yeah.
Or you can like, I don't know, maybe have like a dress with a really pretty pattern, and you can spread that underneath your books. And like, you know, like, there's a lot you can do. And that's the thing. As writers, we're creative people. And so I always encourage people to look at the marketing and the Instagram side that you hate. Look at that as just a creative thing that you're good at, because you're a creative person. You know, and just enjoy doing it. Like, enjoy coming up with these pretty captions and pretty pictures. Like, it's fun. It could be fun.
Yeah. Look at it as like an extension of the book you're writing. Like, it's like
Yeah.
you're bringing it to life in
Mhm.
pictures and reels and stuff, and bring that like energy into it all. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great way. Like, just like create your book in another format,
Mm-hmm.
let
Yeah.
people into that. Like, I love when people do how I dress if I were my characters. Like, there's so
Oh, I've
many
never
fun
seen
things you
that.
can do. Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
so
people like,
cute.
yeah. Yeah, people like dress like their characters,
Oh,
and they'll do a
yes.
reel, like,
That's adorable. I love that idea. See,
yeah.
that's my problem too, is that, and I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir for a lot of people who are self-published out there, but when you're self-published and you feel like you have to constantly advertise your book in order to get people to be interested, not just people who follow you, but like when you're posting reels and stuff, people who are scrolling through whatever find it, you feel very redundant. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know how many times I have sat there and thought, I do not want to make another stupid book flip reel because I've made a million of them. Like, it's hard to find creative ways and to not feel like you're annoying people by doing the same stuff over and over again. And it can be a lot, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. But you can do like which character are you quizzes. Those are really
Yeah.
good. I'm a sucker for a good quiz. Like,
Mhm.
be like, which character from my book are you? And like, that's a
Yeah.
great way. Yeah, there's just so many ways. And see, I'm more on like I enjoy it so much that I have to be like, okay, you need to write because like, I'm like, I love like thinking of all these like different like ways to like market it, but it's like if you don't have a product,
Yeah.
like what are you marketing?
This is when you need a blog so that you can like make like these idea lists of different ways you can market your book, or like different fun types of reels or posts you can make. Because like for me, I'm like, do I post another excerpt? I feel like that's all I'm supposed to do is just post another excerpt. But then it's like, how many excerpts can you post before you've posted the entire book on social media?
Yeah,
So it's
yeah.
like, I need more creative ways. Like all these things you're saying, I never thought about them before, but I love all of it. It's genius.
Yeah, and that's a great idea because while we're on the topic of like author business, so we've talked about Instagram. One thing I want to start this year is a newsletter. So maybe that's like something I can put in my newsletter because I think I'm gonna do a Substack one. I might do like a traditional one later, but like for right now, I was like, you know what, I want to do a Substack so that way it can be like a cross between like a blog and a newsletter because I wanted it to provide value for like the audience rather than being an update on me. Like I'm not quite ready for like to do that kind yet, but I was like, I could do like a newsletter, about I forgot what my idea was, but I think it was like kind of like, like as a creative person. So like two creative people.
Yeah.
And that's a great topic I can put like maybe one week can be like, here are some great content ideas, for marketing your book. Like just for marketing your book, but like here are all the different like creative ways you could maybe do it. So thank you. You just gave me a great idea. But
I mean, sometimes the best ideas like for what to do or like what niche you fit into is when people compliment you on being good at a certain thing and you're like, oh, okay, I guess that's like the thing I have a talent for. That's cool to know. Like I can kind of like lean into that.
Yeah. Yeah. And everybody's good at different things. So like if you're good at one thing, like that's another thing, whether it's in your email newsletter or your blog or on your social media feed, you can maybe give people tips. And I feel like it's hard at first because you might feel like, okay, everybody already knows this, or like, what right do I have to say about it? But you never know who's going to stumble across your newsletter, your blog, your social media. It might be a new writer who's like thinking about like starting like a writergram account or whatever, and they are at the beginning of the journey and they don't know it. Or maybe there's someone who is super experienced, but they just are different from you. So they still could use your advice.
Yeah. If you're not always learning things, what are you doing? Like you should always be open to learning new stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Like everyone can always benefit for learning stuff. And maybe it's something that somebody's heard before, but just like the way you put it, like finally clicks. You never know.
Yeah.
So,
I agree.
yeah. So there's newsletters, and Rachel, you have a newsletter.
Mm-hmm.
When did you start your newsletter?
I think this last summer. But I've only been consistent about it for about 2 months. Let's just be honest. Because at first I was like, I didn't totally understand the point of a newsletter, because for me, the only newsletters I had in my inbox were ones that I didn't pay attention to.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like, do people really care? Is this really worth it? But then I read a whole bunch of stuff about how, Instagram could implode at any point in time and you could lose all of it. So it's good to have like an email list of people that you could continue to notify about your stuff. Yeah. Like, it's a valuable thing to have on the side. However, I do feel like you said, to where you want to have a newsletter that's like giving, information or insight to people and whatnot. I feel like I kind of want to play around with different types of newsletters, because updating people on what you're doing is important for sure. But I feel like I'd like for it to be more creative and more fun. Like, I'm sharing something interesting rather than just, hey, this is what I'm working on right now. You know, I feel like that's the hard part with doing all these different things with independent publishing, is seeing how it's been done for like years and years and kind of feeling like, well, that kind of sounds boring to me. How do we make this more fun for me to do, to where I'm actually going to enjoy this part of the job?
Yeah, I agree. And like, with newsletters, I was the same way, because like I would never read them, but then I really enjoy monthly newsletters. So, I mean, some people send out, because I've signed up, like to get like a free novella, whatever. I've signed up for a bunch. So there's authors who will send you something every day. There's authors who do it like every week, every 2 weeks, and there's ones who do monthly. And I tend to enjoy the monthly ones more, because like a lot of times the monthly newsletter people are people like I know from Instagram, and that always helps. So if it's people I can know from like other platforms versus like a random person I signed up for their book. Like, if I don't know them as well, it's not as good. But like the monthly ones, they're just like, they're generally designed better. Like, they look aesthetically pleasing, and there tends to be more like valuable, interesting content in it.
Yeah.
Versus like if you're doing it every day, there's that like quality versus quantity thing.
Yeah.
And a lot of these people who like email every day, and that might work on another type of person, it just doesn't work for me. I just, I don't really care. And even with like people who send out one like every couple of weeks, it's like, like it's, the more often you do it, the more often you have to think of stuff, and sometimes you're not going to be able to think of something really good. So I prefer monthly newsletters, especially for updating. Now, if you were doing a more informative one, and as long as you could come up with something valuable every single week, but then you have to look at like, are you really going to be able to do that? I would say that's
on
a good
top
idea.
of everything else.
Yeah, because, and then with email newsletters, people do say, I've heard, just like Instagram, you're supposed to vary up your content. So if you just sent an author update, then the next one you might want to do a different topic, and it's the same with like posting on Instagram. Like, you'll do an author one, you'll do a book one, you'll do a what I'm reading one, you'll do a writing craft one, and you like kind of like vary it. Just like we're doing with this podcast. Like, we're not going to do like a bunch of writing episodes back to back. You got to vary it.
It's going to vary. Yeah. And I mean, for things like that, for like, I guess that's one of the things too about independently publishing, is you do so much research on your own. You do everything on your own, really. But I guess like subscribing to as many things as possible, like the number of newsletters I've subscribed to just to see what they look like, so that I get ideas on what I should be doing, or like how many people I've followed, or how many books I've read, or like, when I was formatting, I had stacks of books next to me, and I'm reformatting, and I have stacks of books, and I'm like going through them like, hey, they did a page like this, they did a page like this. Like, I guess the point is like looking at what other people are doing, subscribe to different newsletters, look at people's content, and look at different people's books and how they do things, or listen to their audiobooks and figure out where they got that person recorded it from or whatever. And that's a lot of how you learn in this industry, is just by like kind of researching what everybody else is doing, kind of figuring out what's going to work for you. Has been a lot of it for me.
Yeah. And then there comes the point of, because like you do need to do your research and you do need to look at all this stuff. What happens when you're doing too much? You know what I mean? Like you have signed up for too many beta reads, too many ARC reads. You know what I mean? You're subscribed to so many newsletters that like it takes you like hours to like check your email every morning. Like, and like when is too much research like enough? You know what I mean? Like then there's that balance point. And yeah, like I think that for me is the toughest part, because there's always so much information out there, and there's so many resources, and that's a great thing, but it's like you have to know like when enough is enough. Like I went through a month where I did like 5 beta reads.
Oh my goodness. Oh my gosh.
Because I kept telling myself like, oh, don't sign, but like it just looks so good and I wanted to do it. And I also told myself like, you know, if you ever want to be an editor one day, like you need practice. Like, and I'm glad I did it actually, because at the end of that month, like I felt like my skills had improved dramatically on like when it came to like seeing what an author was doing and figuring out their vision and trying to like, you know, but which is not what every beta read, because some beta readers just want it from like a reader's perspective. But I really like doing beta reads and giving like constructive, like I prefer the ones that want like the more writer constructive feedback, you know, where you can be like, okay, so like your theme is this, so like maybe, you know, this could like help bring it out more, or that, or, you know. And it was great, but then I was like, okay, if you're doing this many beta reads, like when are you writing? You know,
that's a hard balance between trying to pursue multiple different like passions and side hustles and ideas, and definitely for sure. I got super overwhelmed like 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I was like kind of panicked, and I was talking to I go to coaching sessions, which is kind of like therapy, and I was talking to my coach, and she was like, so what we need to do right now, because I was like at a very high anxiety level, is just prioritize. Like it's kind of like when you just like brain dump everything you want to do, and then you've got to pick out what are the things that you either have to do, like because there's an actual deadline attached to it and it has to be accomplished, like if it's a group project or something. And then what are the things that like you're the most passionate about? And then once you've got like a list of things that like, you know, you can do this list and not be super stressed, you should probably stop. And then if you end up having time, you can add these other things onto the list. But let's just focus on that short list for now. Because it's better to like be like, oh, I actually have more time to pursue this thing, than to think, well, shoot, I don't have the time I thought I had. You know, it's better to end up with more time. So.
Yeah, and I agree. And like you have to do that. And it's hard, like at first. I feel like you get better as it as you go on. But you know, I signed up to be like you know, all these beta readers, and I had like all these different critique partners. And then it's like when you're doing something with another person involved, it's like you have to follow through. And you know, you have to find that line where it's like, okay, maybe you just don't have the time to work with a critique partner, or like you have a writers group, so you don't have time for writers group and critique partner. You know, like I definitely recommend doing that, because it is very helpful and it will help you as a writer, but you cannot be everybody's critique partner. Like you do like 50 million beta reads. You can't necessarily post content every single day that's going to be amazing. You know, it's just like we're all limited by time, and you really have to be mindful of that. And I think like what you were saying is try everything and figure out what you really like, and then stick with that and let all the rest go. Like
and like your list of like the things that you can accomplish in a week is probably going to be different than the things that I can accomplish in a week, because things that stress me out might not stress you out, and things that come easily for you might not come easily for me. So it's like when you are trying to figure out how to prioritize and whatnot, you have to kind of go with your gut of what's going to cause you stress. Where do you have to draw your lines at? Like for me, creating content every day isn't going to be a thing, because it stresses me out. I'm not naturally inclined to making good content. So for me, it's more of a struggle, and I don't want to spend every day doing it. But for some people, they love doing it every day. Like, so everybody's list of what you can reasonably handle is going to be different. You just kind of have to listen. I guess my advice would be listen to your own stress levels and don't try and do what everybody else is doing because that seems like the right thing to do. You need to kind of wiggle around and figure out what's going to be the best for you to pursue, because you can't do all of it.
Yeah. And like now coming to like the end of this discussion, and I'm just thinking back to the beginning, and when we went into this discussion, like I was thinking of it more in like a negative way, like, oh, it was so great when we were kids and we could just read. But now that we've talked about it, I don't know that I would trade it, because yeah, it's crazy, but we're adults now. And part of being an adult is making it good despite the crazy. And that's the thing, like, you have choices, you have agency. And yes, there's so many resources out there. There's so much content. There's so much you could create.
Yeah.
But it's the choices you make and finding those best things and like limiting your time for certain things that is really beautiful. And as kids, it's like, it's like the concept of free will. Everything was great, but it wasn't like you didn't make that really happen. You know what I mean? Your parents made it happen. But it's like you as an adult can deal with this craziness and still have a very productive but peaceful life.
Yeah.
If you learn how to do like what works best. And I think that's really beautiful. And it's like we couldn't have that sense of accomplishment if we didn't have the crazy amount of stress. Because, we went into this talking about how, oh, it's so awful, like it gets so stressful. Yeah. But it's like it wouldn't be good if we weren't able to combat that stressfulness.
Yeah. And I think too, excuse me. I think too, it's kind of like when it comes to writing a story, like when you're a kid, you're just like, oh, I'm just I'm writing a story, I'm doing whatever I want, and it's great, and it's fun. But then you read the story and it's not good.
Yeah.
And it's like, so part of doing this as a job is that you get the pressure and the stress of trying to make it not just like, but making it really great. Like with your story, with your marketing, with all of it. Like you're making the decision to put forth the effort to really make it good and successful. And that can be really stressful and intense and emotional. But that's where you get a lot of reward too, because you see the fruits of your labor and you're like, oh, wow, the story is really good now. Or, oh my gosh, I really am enjoying this content now, or whatever. So, I mean, that's part of it, is just you've chosen to make this a priority. So you have to put in all of this work, but then you see it, working, and you see it like improving, and it's like, oh, okay, this is worth it. Yeah. Okay, we can do this.
Yeah. Yeah, because like, we don't live in a magic world. Things do not come from nothing, and if you want a result, there has to be something that it comes from. Like, you can't just magic bread out of thin air.
Yeah.
Like, the wheat has to be grown and then it has to be turned into this and that. Like, that's just how it is in our reality. And once you realize that, because it's with anything, like, if you want to be big on Instagram, it is going to take you time and effort. Like, people don't just get lucky on anything. And I think social media really makes it seem, but like those people who are big, they put in so much work, like learning how to take good photos, blah, blah. Those people who sell all these books, they put in so much work learning how to write and just like perfecting their craft every single day. So you get into it, or you get out of it what you put into it.
Yes,
and there's no cheat around that, whether it's a social media post, whether it's a newsletter, whether it's your book, whether it's your cover, whether, it's just the effort is going to determine the result.
Yes.
And that's how it is. Like, life is very simple. It's hard, but it's simple.
Yes. Yeah. It's no different than when you decided to take this fun little writing hobby and turn it into something you were actually going to publish. Like, you made that decision and then you followed through with the effort it took to do it. And that's the rest of the process is the same way. Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel like we kind of gave like what our takeaway from this is, but is there anything else you'd like to say on navigating the crazy like indie author world?
I think the only other thing I'd say is some of you are going to think, I don't want to know anything. I just want to start doing it, and then I'll find it out later because you're terrified. And then some of you are like, I want to know everything and be super prepared. And the fact is, you can be as prepared as you want, you can research as much as you want, but you are going to learn so much as you go, and it's better that way, because you're ready for that growth once you start learning those things. So, like, I guess what I would say is it's intense. There's a lot that goes into it, but you learn as you go along, and it's kind of just a natural growth that you get to see this really great thing come to life that you decided to pursue. So I guess don't be scared, and just take it as it comes.
Yeah. I would agree with that. Like, learning by doing is like the best way to learn. So like, don't freak yourself out with like future steps. Stay present. Do some yoga. Stay in the moment.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, yeah, just have fun. Create what inspires you. Like, when you're creating something, it should inspire you to create more. Like, everything you should create should be inspirational to yourself.
Yeah.
But yeah.
That.
If you have any other tips or something that you've learned along the way, like, let us know. Like, we would love to hear them. It might even spark our next discussion.
Yes.
Like, you might say something. We're like, oh, that's a really good point. Like, let's talk about this.
Yes,
So yeah, just let us know. And yeah, we'll see you next time.
Yeah, thank you guys for listening. Bye.